I've been experimenting with how to make tall latticework towers out of Lego Technic. Whoa! The way these Lego Technic beams connect, it's like the ideal material for making pin joint trusses. But for making latticework towers, you also need to connect diagonals at a right angle, and there's no holes on this side, so this is not ideal. There are, of course, some of these Technic beams that have holes on two sides like this, but these are relatively rare, and we only have a few of those. But we have a lot of these rectangular frames because a lot of the bigger Lego Technic sets use those to hold the structure together. And if I put a bunch of these together like this, that can be sort of the core of a tower by attaching beams to edges like that, and that makes for a square cross section. And that way I can just attach the next section here, except I've only got one pin left here, so that makes it kind of wobbly. And even if the next one stiffens it up like that, that still has quite a lot of flex like this, although it's much stiffer in this direction. And from here to here is 8 studs, so if I double a 3, 4, 5 triangle, I can get a diagonal that works out perfectly. So we have 8 studs here, and we go 6 this way, and this one has got 11 holes, so that makes for an offset of 10. So that is a perfect right triangle, and that stiffens up the diagonal quite a lot. But I wanted my diagonal struts to be longer, so I went for an 8, 9, 12 triangle, which anybody who's into math will know that that is not a perfect right triangle, but it's really close. Close enough here because this Technic stuff has got a lot of flex to it. And how close is this? So this is a 6, 8, 10 triangle, basically twice a 3, 4, 5. And this is an 8, 9, 12 triangle. And it actually fits on here imperfectly because we're 0.05 studs off. So that does warp a little bit. And 0.05 studs works out to 0.3 millimeters. That's about this much. See the gap here? So this gap, that's how far it's off. So that's how I built the tower with my 8, 9, 12 triangles. And on this side, the stiffness of the frames is enough that I didn't need any diagonals because they'd be hard to add. Of course, I do have the holes here and here, so I could put something across here, but there's nothing that works out even close to add one like that. But then I realized I could optimize this further. So instead of having these 3 frames periodically inside and a diagonal on the outside, why not put the diagonals on the frame and put that on the inside like this? And so that's how I continued building. And of course, in this direction, the stiffness is the same because I have the same number of diagonals. But in this direction, I have far fewer of these frames to stiffen it up, but these are much better coupled now. So it gives it enough stiffness this way that it's okay. And it's still stiff enough this way. I can take the whole tower and hold it sideways, both this way where it's the strongest and this way as well. Although the one downside of the joints like this is it gives it relatively low torsional stability, so that makes the tower a little bit wobbly this way. Now I don't want that tower to tip over easily, so I made a wider base for it like this, but this is not ideal. With all these diagonal pieces, I can only join the corner with one pin because it's coming at it at an angle, and so this makes for a base that is unfortunately far too flexible, so it doesn't have the stiffness I would like it to have. And I've realized that a single pin is just not stiff enough for this tower. So for instance here I still have just the one pin, and when the tower flexes you can really see it moving there. So I've tried to make everything join with at least 2 pins by just adding a piece here to bridge that, but I haven't done all the corners yet. There are, of course, these Lego pieces for joining things at an angle where I could use more than one pin, but these are all kind of flaring out much more than I'd like them to. See, they go like this, where I'd rather have it going more vertical, so if it was like this, but then that doesn't really help me very much. And then for this corner, I still have a problem because that piece just doesn't work out. Ideally, I figure if I could just kind of gradually flare out the bottom of the tower to make it wider, sort of like is done for long-distance transmission line towers, but how to do that with Legos. But I realized if I join 2 Technic beams with pins right next to each other, that still has actually quite a bit of flex to it, and I could take advantage of that to flare out the tower. And I bet this is getting a lot of Lego purists really upset. So every time I connected beams together with 2 pins next to each other, I bent it outwards a little bit, and I just experimented with what diagonals work out close enough. None of these are perfect in terms of Pythagorean theorem, especially because the sides are now not parallel. And on the opposite face, I did need diagonal lattice work now, so I just connected those with this type of connecting pieces. And I flared out just by doing the offset on the connection every time and getting one stud wider on each connection. So that makes for a much stiffer tower base, and then I used my simplified method of construction to build more tower with what Lego pieces I had. So I'm just going to move the top of that tower onto my new base. And there it is, and I used the same technique for the spire as I used for the base, except I was tapering inwards instead of flaring outwards. And this whole tower does have rather poor torsional stiffness, so if I grab it near the top and just give it a twist, that whole structure really wobbles. But it holds together. And unlike building a tower to the ceiling out of Lego Duplo, this one isn't prone to collapse. It holds up quite well and I can move it. Whereas if I built to the ceiling with Lego Duplo, you just gotta go and it falls over.